The California Residential Purchase Agreement form is the cornerstone of every successful real estate transaction in the state of California. In this training video, we will review how to properly complete and use the RPA form step by step to better serve and protect yourself and your clients. This training is not intended to be a substitute for the advice of your broker, nor that of your attorney. We will cover paragraphs 1 and 2. Our instructor for this video is Kevin Burke. Let's get started.
One of my favorite subjects, of course, is my purchase agreement. So let's get started. Now, I want to remind you of something that's very, very important. Okay, it's incredibly important to remember that when you create your offer, you are creating essentially CAR's first attempt at a template. So always, before you write an offer, before you take a listing, whether it's a buyer listing or a seller listing, you always have your agency disclosure of all the things that I get hauled into court on. There's always going to be discussion about agency relationships, code of ethics, what the law says, Civil Code 2079. So please don't eliminate that form. I've seen people, in fact, in our fact pattern yesterday, we had, the agent, went into the filing cabinet and pulled out a purchase agreement, but did not have the agency disclosure. And so huge agency issues, license loser. So make sure you have that in there. We're not here to discuss that today, but you absolutely must have that before you start having any substantive conversation with the client. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the California Residential Purchase Agreement and joint escrow instructions. So some of you have heard that we are updating the form. Yeah. Okay. So here's what was going on. We were going to launch the RPA, the new one, on December of this year. Your risk management committee, and I have to tell you, they are wonderful people, attorneys, brokers, you're probably your broker, big people in this meeting, and we all went through that RPA because we all have access to it. We all went through it, and we were having some real problems with. It wasn't so much that it was going to 16 pages, but it was just so much of what was in there that was just misaligned. And so we had great feedback. We forwarded that information to the California Association of Realtors, and whether it was dependent on that or not, they have decided not to release the new RPA until 2021. So this is still the way it's going to work. And the principles that we talk about in here are also going to carry into that new purchase agreement. All right. Because a lot of the things that we talk about are contract based. They're, first of all, we're trying to create an agreement between a buyer and a seller, but the attorneys at CAR and at SDAR are trying to make sure that the agreement that we create is actually binding and actually understandable. Remember, your contract must be written in plain English. Otherwise, you have no meeting of the minds. If they don't understand what they're signing, then you don't have an agreement, okay? And then you don't need to be a lawyer to know that. That's just contract law. It just says without a meeting of the minds, you have no contract, okay? All right, that being said, please make sure you're using the current forms. Okay, I had somebody do this. Back when I was management at a pretty big company in town, and they walked into the filing cabinet and grabbed an old form, and I'm looking at they've got it signed by everybody, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, we got a problem, and this form is like 5 years old. So please don't grab forms out of filing cabinets. All right, you try to use your Zip Forms program to make sure that you are using the current form. Everybody good with that? California Residential Purchase Agreement and joint escrow instructions. And some of us will remember that the old terms that we used to call this back before October of 2002, we used to call it the California Residential Purchase Agreement and receipt for deposit, and actually it might have been October of 12. So we used to actually take the deposit from the client at the time of an offer, okay? But we got away from that, and now it is a joint escrow instruction. So when we created this agreement, we went to the escrow company, we went to the title company, we went to the lenders, we went to the service providers, our affiliates, and we asked them, what can we do to make this agreement more something that's easier for you to work with? And so we found that the escrow companies were duplicating a lot of what we were already doing. We would create an agreement between the buyer and the seller, then we would fax it. If you remember what a fax machine is, fax it over to the escrow company, and the escrow company would then now draft, their interpretation of the agreement. Well, that just wasn't working, because a lot of times they wouldn't get it right, or there'd be a conflict between their agreement and our agreement, their document, not their agreement. Remember, they don't create an agreement between the parties. You do. And so you have to remember that you are writing the agreement between the parties, not escrow. Don't call escrow up and say, will you do an amendment? No, you have to create the amendment, okay? Because you create the contract. Escrow is just a third party. They don't want to get involved in your contractual relationship that you have created. They're not licensed to do it. And that's a big mistake that I see agents and brokers making, is they'll call the escrow company and they'll ask them to draft up an amendment to an agreement, and that's wrong. And then, of course, they try to put language in there that makes it binding on the parties, and then all you're really doing, since they aren't licensed to conduct real estate activities in that manner, you're putting them in the hot seat, and you're putting yourself in the hot seat. So everybody understand, I want you to be careful how you write this. You don't need a whole lot of history in how the purchase agreement has evolved over the years to know that you got to use the current form. Remember, you also have the user protection agreement, which says that the California Association of Realtors will help defend you in the event that there is a lawsuit based on the pre-printed language in the form. Understand that really all that means is that at the appellate level, they will draft an amicus brief, amicus curiae, friend of the court document in your favor, because of something that they have in the form. So always ask questions, question authority, but trust that you are using the form that is the standard of practice and the standard of care in California. And one of the reasons that's so incredibly important is because if you get hauled into court, or you get hauled in front of the DRE, one of the first questions they're going to ask you is, did you use the standard form, or did you make up your own stuff? And by the way, when we do counter offers we're making up our own stuff. So, this stuff, the reason why your RPA and most of your other documents already have pre-printed language in them is very little for you to do in the RPA other than understand it, because they don't want you freewheeling it. And that was what came up in our lawsuit avoidance class yesterday, is that when you're freewheeling it, when you're just making stuff up as you go along, you're going to create problems for yourself. Okay. And listen, we love our broker. We want to take good care of our broker. And when we start getting crazy, and I call it creative realtoring, and attorneys, when I say that, they love it. They think it's the funniest thing they ever heard. And you should be in on some of these conversations. I'm glad you're not. Okay. So thankfully, and I thank you for being here today. So, okay, good. So let's roll. Okay. Now we're going to talk today. We're going to talk about the residential purchase agreement. So I showed you the header of the document first to make sure that you look for that revision date up here at the top. All right. Now for right now, I'm going to pull up my annotation, because you all know I love to annotate my screen. So I'm going to pull up my annotation, and I'm going to see if I can put it someplace where it's not in the way, dragging it down here to the bottom. Okay, good. All right, that being said, okay, so a couple things. One, I'm noting in here that I'm using the current form. It was revised in 12/18, okay, and it's not giving me my proper thing here. Where's my deal? Draw. Okay, all right, I'm gonna live with it. Okay, it's gonna be blue today. I don't know why it's blue, not red. Okay, so first thing right off the bat that we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be looking at our date prepared. Now, some of you will remember that language used to be over here, and it just said date. And the problem with that was that we didn't really know what that meant, okay? Date prepared, we need to have a linking mechanism. We need to have something that links this contract with other contracts that are coming. And so we're going to talk about that when we discuss things like recitals, who the parties are, things like that. And that's essentially what paragraph number 1 is. Paragraph number 1 is, when was the document prepared? That is not the date of the contract. So as you probably remember, the date of the contract is when you have agreement by all parties, and then you have confirmation back to the party to be bound. Okay, so you write, your buyer writes an offer, they become the offeror, the seller is the offeree, they receive the offer assuming that they accept it. Now they have to communicate the acceptance back to the buyer, and that we call that confirmation of acceptance. Okay, so that's what creates the date of your actual contract versus the date that you created it. And since when you're creating it, you're adding a bunch of forms at the time you're creating it, you don't know what the date of the contract is going to be. You just know the date you prepared it. So that's why we have that language in there. Okay. Isn't that fun? That's pretty exciting. I think, hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay. So this is the date that you prepared it. My advice, my non-legal advice is, please do not post date. Please do not predate a contract. Sometimes I see cute things where people, oh, I sent it over to you 2 days ago. Well, I don't know. I've had cases where I've had to look at, digital signatures and determine whether or not, that was the actual date, and that can get kind of ugly. So let's not, let's do it truthfully. Let's the date that you prepared it, not the date that they signed it. But if you are preparing it today for them to sign tomorrow, then put today's date. Okay? Everybody good with that? Questions? Seeing none? Okay, good. I'm going to roll forward. Okay, so paragraph number 1. This is an offer from, God, I wish that was in red. Why is that not in, oh, you know what? Let's make it red. There we go. Okay. All right. So this is an offer. Paragraph number 1 is an offer. Who is an offer? An offer from. So what are you going to put in there? Well, of course, you're going to put in the buyer's name, right? Now, you'll have enough room for 2 buyers. If you need more, you're going to have to use the additional signature addendum, or if in fact you're signing on behalf of an entity, if the person is an entity that is purchasing the property, you would put the entity's name in here, and then you would use the RCSDB to denote who that entity was, who the authorized signer was for on behalf of that entity. If so you only have 2 kinds of persons. You have a natural person, you have a non-natural person. So in here, if it's going to be a natural person if they are buying it in their name, and if it is a non-natural person, so if it's a corporation that's buying it, you put in the name of the corporation. So the corporation goes in here, okay, and then the RCSDB says, this person over here is signing on, they are the authorized sign or the authorized signatory, as we say, on behalf of the corporation. But always this here. And the way to remember that, the easy way to remember that, Nancy, is that you want to ask the question, how do you want your name to appear on title? So Galena, I know you're writing this down. So how do you want your name to appear on title? Not how do you want to take title? Because how do you want to take title is essentially offering tax or legal advice, but instead, how do you want your name to appear? 99% of the time, they're going to say, well, I don't know. My name is Bob. And it's like, not, what does it say on your driver's license? Because when you go to prove up who you are, the lender wants your name, your legal name. And if it is inconsistent with the name that is here, the lender's going to make you redo the agreement. Okay, everybody follow me? The easiest way to tell is, what does it say on your driver's license? Okay. So, because remember, you're going to have to prove up, we say that, prove up who you are to the parties. You're also going to have to prove up who you are to the lender. Escrow is going to ask you to sign things. You're going to have to prove that you are that person. So you're going to have some documentation that's almost always going to be a driver's license, or it's going to be a passport or something else. And then, of course, if it is a corporation, if you're signing on behalf of a non-natural person, then you're going to need articles of incorporation. You're going to need a signatory page, whatever you're going to need, the trust cert, things like that you're going to need to prove that you are the person authorized to sign on behalf of that entity, okay? You're never going to put in here husband and wife. You're never going to put in anything that talks about title to the property as joint tenants. You're not going to put that in there. You're going to put the name of the person, again, as it appears on their proof. So if their proof is their driver's license, that's probably the way the name's going to have to be. They want to change their name later, fine, but rather let's do it now. Let's do it the right way now. Somebody mentioned that this morning. I'd rather do it the right way the first time. So let's do it the right way the first time and avoid that trap of veteran agents sometimes where they say, oh, that's okay, we'll take care of it in escrow. Well, we'll take care of it in escrow means you're going to have the escrow company draft an addendum that says everywhere that it says Bob, it really means Robert. And so why don't you just do that here? And so ask the question up front, how do you want your name to appear on title? Not how do you want to take title? Everybody good with that? It's a pretty important point of law, unfortunately. Safe to ask for a legal name. So Jason, that's a really good question. So they aren't going to know what you mean, all right? but you know how they're going to have to say, how they're going to have to prove what their legal name is. And like I said, and here's the trick. Not only do they have to prove who they are when they buy the property, but they also have to prove who they are when they get rid of the property, or when they hypothecate it later, when they add a loan later, or you know, a refinance or anything like that. It's going to have to be the same thing. Otherwise, you got all this stuff. And then, you know, when we do it wrong and people go, oh, crazy realtors. Well, you know, come on. So, you know, here's the thing. And then you go, so listen, you're paying cash for the house, right? Okay, good. You're paying $1 million cash for a house. You know, I can have any name I want to for my name. I want to call myself Mickey Mouse. Okay, I don't need title insurance. I'm paying cash. All right, good. You're just buying a house with where the Mickey Mouse owns the property. So now when you go to sell that property, how are you going to prove that you are Mickey Mouse? All right, maybe a video from when you were on the Mouseketeers. No. Okay. So you're going to have to prove who you are going into the deal. You're going to have to prove who you are coming out of the deal. And here on the legal issue, unfortunately, here is where this gets even worse. And that is, if there's a suit between the parties, so like the seller says, okay, I'm accepting the buyer's offer, and then later on, the buyer's coming back and trying to change their name from Bob to Robert. Now think about this. Don't you need to have the seller's acceptance, the seller's approval to change the name? You know what? You're adding a party. You do. You need to have the seller's approval. Oh, but they got an offer for $1.5 million. Now, guess what? Now, seller says, I kind of want out of this deal because I got a better one over here for way a lot more money. So you know what, guess what? I'm not going to approve of the change to Bob. And so we're going to cancel, you know, Bob can't close this deal because the lender won't give him a loan because his name isn't Bob. His name is Robert. Okay. And I have no offense to Bob's and Roberts. I'm just telling you that because this is a real life scenario. And when we have sellers who are trying to get out of transactions, this is one of the things that their lawyers look for. So I'm sorry, in my world, I'm in both. So I'm in there all the time going, really? Hey, that's pretty clever. Okay. I'm telling all my buddies back in the realtor school that here's what you guys are doing. All right. So this is just a way for them to do it. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for attorneys and any profession. But I'm going to tell you, when it comes to money, and this is money, when it comes to money, people are real determined about either making more or saving more. And I don't want to be involved in that trap. Okay. So Jason, great question. Thank you for asking that. Safe to ask for a legal name. I'm going to tell you, what does it say on your driver's license? You know, what document are you going to use to prove who you are to the lender or to the notary? The notary's going to want to see your DL, right? Okay. So what does it say on your DL? I mean, the state of California made you prove who you were at one point. Now I don't know what they're doing, God knows. But bottom line is, safer still to ask them for, you know, how does your name appear on the document that you're going to use to show proof that you are who you say you are. Okay. All right. Great question. Great question. Okay. Trying to make sure my audio setting is not on this other screen because yeah, good. All right. So otherwise they're hearing my, you know, NAR is hearing my conversation. Okay. So that being said, everybody good? Who the buyer is? I think we kind of killed that. Let's talk about now paragraph number B. God, before I run out of time, paragraph number B, the real property to be acquired is, and by the way, I'm going to be teaching the law class, continuing ed for attorneys in June at UCSD again. And I covered, this is what we do. We go through this. And of course I get a lot of head nods when I'm doing that because, you know, this is just the way that it is. So, okay. So anyway, the real property, real, not personal. You're not here to sell jewelry. You're not selling automobiles. You have a license that allows you to sell, to assist in the transaction and the transfer of property from a seller to a buyer. Real property, big deal. Okay. To be acquired is, and what are you going to put in here? You're going to put in the address. And once again, if you're using MLS Connect, then you should have all of that information preloaded for you. Okay. So make sure you've got the right address. You know, I'm going to tell you, you know, you go into MLS and you see the listing and you click on the CRS tax data, which is a good way to find out that you've got the right property, sometimes the agent's got the wrong address. They didn't input it in there doing it through tax autofill. They just kind of freewheeled it, and now they got a wrong address. I've done that. I haven't done it. I sold a property in Oceanside where the agent had put in the wrong address. And literally when we closed, it looked the same. When we closed the transaction, buyer calls me 6 months later and says, "Hey, guess what? I've been paying the HOA dues. I've been paying the state the dues for the common area and not paying the taxes on my individual unit." And it's like, uh-oh, and title screwed up, and they had to redo the entire document. So, it was a mess, and there was a lot of money involved. Unfortunately, he was a commercial broker, so he's a pretty bright guy. He had caught that, and I miss him. He passed away not long after that, but I don't think it was because of the stress of this event. But anyway, so easy. What is the street address? Remember, the street address is not the legal description. And when I'm teaching this class in other states, we talk about that. The legal description, this is just an accommodation, right? So, but the important part's going to come later. I'm going to put in the city, I'm going to put in the county, but then I'm also going to put in the zip. And by the way, in our office, we always look up zip +4. It's provided for you if you do it right in the MLS. And then that APN number. So remember the APN number, for those of you that were sitting through my new member orientations when I was doing those for the association, that APN number is like the thumbprint of the property. So you want to make sure you got the right APN number for the right property. Okay. All right. That being said, questions on any of that? I'm going to go on to number C. Where's everybody? 1, 2. We're good. Okay. All right. Number C. 2 was 2 questions. That's what we had in the queue. Not 2 people watching. A lot more than that. Okay. Purchase price is going to be. And so again, as we discussed in lawsuit avoidance yesterday, you ask your client how much they want to offer. You give them comps. You do an RPR. You run a fast stats. Whatever it is, you determine, you give them information, but it is the client's decision how much to offer. And so if you were ever asked, now I'm assuming you're going to get a buyer representation agreement with your client, but if your client says, how much will the seller take? The seller's going to, it says $1 million. And so I guess the seller will take $1 million. That has to be your answer when you're representing the seller. But if I have a buyer representation agreement and I'm showing my client the actual value of the property, may be inconsistent with what the seller thinks that their property is worth. When's the last time you met a seller who thought their house wasn't worth more than it really was? Okay. And so the buyer always wants to get it for less, seller always wants to get it for more. And our job is to try to put the two together. So you take instructions from your buyer. How much do you want to offer for the property? Okay. All you can do is give suggestions. This is what RPR, I like RPR. This is what RPR says it's probably worth. What do you think? And then your client says, and in our fact pattern yesterday, client says, well, I want to write the offer for 20% less. Remember, you have an obligation to present all written offers, but anything else, probably not. But if your client writes an offer for $800,000 on $1 million property, if you write the offer, you have an obligation to present it. And by the way, so does the listing agent. So, so make sure that you're doing this the right way, again, as we said the first time. So you're going to put in the purchase price, you're going to put that in here, and then it's automatically, once you tab out of that field in zip forms, it'll fill in all the, the ands and the dollar signs and all that stuff for you. Okay. Everybody good on price? I'm going to clear my drawings. Okay, D, we're doing pretty good. We might actually get done on time. D, let's talk about D, close of escrow. So, from my legal brain, which, again, I'm not an attorney, but got too much training. I want the same training, right? 3 years of law school. Lord help us. I graduated first in my class, American Jurisprudence Award in real estate. But close of escrow, I don't really like the word, but that's just kind of how we talk. So I like recordation. Okay, recordation, when title transfers from seller to buyer, that's the real close of escrow, rather than the close of escrow being on the 5th of May or something like that. The close of escrow kind of leads people to makes it uncertain for people. I prefer recordation, so you're going to hear me say that a lot. I won't belabor it here. We move right here. We have a checkbox for you to put in a date. Okay, so when you click, there's a little arrow over here. When you click that little arrow, it gives you a drop down, and then now you're going to pick a date on the calendar that is presented for you. And the reason behind that, and so Galena, write this down. The reason behind that is that the law likes a date certain. That's a quote. The law likes a date certain. So the law likes to know that you looked at a calendar and said, I want to close on this date. Okay. And that avoids a lot of problems. First of all, I know, I'm sorry, you've got to count 45 days, figure it out. Okay. But do you want your transaction closing on Memorial Day weekend? Do you want to try to close it on Saturday? Okay. Do you want to close it on the Friday? If anything goes wrong, it'll be the lender, it won't fund in time. And then guess what? Now your client doesn't get the keys until Tuesday because you tried to make it close on Friday and everybody wasn't ready. So then it funded Friday but didn't record until Tuesday, which means your buyer's paying prepaid interest, among other things, prorations, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Then they get the keys on Tuesday. And folks, we're working in price ranges here in San Diego County that when we make a mistake like that, it's a lot of money. It can be $1,000, $2,000 or more. And guess what? They're going to come to somebody looking for it. They don't want to lose the house. And that's why we want to look at a date. Okay, we want to make sure it doesn't land on a holiday. I probably would not have it land on a Friday. I would probably not want it to have on the last week of the month. I don't want to be one of 1,000 closings. I want to be kind of out there on my own, maybe Wednesday, the third week or something like that. Now, I personally don't believe in 30-day transactions. I don't believe in 45 or 60-day transactions. There are scenarios where that may be necessary. But in most cases, since all of my contingencies are probably going to have to get removed by the 17th day, then I might be thinking that's a good day to close. And hear me out. 17 days. What happens between 18 and 30? I say this in my law class, and that is for you to get sued, right? If something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong between the 18th and the 30th day. So why don't you just close it on the 17th day? Okay, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, and plus it gets us taken care of faster. Jason, can you define what a day is considered? So calendar days, good. So the contract says all days are calendar days unless specified otherwise, right? Take a look at your definitions on paragraph number 22. Okay, and that's a really good question, because is it business days or is it calendar days? So your contract states that if the date for performance falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday, then it shall be the next day. And this is confusing for a lot of our agents that have been around a while, because our contracts always said to close on or before, but that was such a nebulous number. It wasn't a defined number, defined date, that we had to look at, okay, what is what are we really trying to say? Okay. And then the next question that you're going to have is, when does the day start counting? And the answer is the date that you did, the date of the start of the performance. So for example, if you have a contract that comes together today, then day one is tomorrow. Day two is Saturday, day three is Sunday, and you don't want, that's exactly 100%, Jason, why I don't use the second feature right here that says, or days after acceptance. And I've had people, it's like talking to rocks. They don't understand it. Now, if you have a reason for doing it, fine, so be it. Again, do what your broker tells you to do, so be it. I'm just telling you that then now everybody's going to be arguing about when it's supposed to close, when are the time periods going to be happening. And I've had some heavy hitters, they blow it off, but okay, fine. See you in court. I like going to court. It's fun. A lot of money for me. Okay. So at the end of the day, no money for us. And I want to make sure we're all doing okay. We don't want to go to court. All right. So to answer your question again, we like that date certain. We like that drop down with the calendar that's got all the days in it. And we like you looking at the calendar and saying, I want it to close on this date. And so arguably, if I've got, my client says I want 30 days and I'm looking at the calendar and the 30th day is on a Saturday, then I might have it. I don't want to close on a Monday, right? Because if it funds on Friday and then closes on Monday, I got the same problem. I've got funding usually occurs the day before a closing, and you need to stay on your lender about that, because the lenders a lot of times, they don't even look at your file until a week before it closes. And so all of a sudden everything's a crisis. So, be careful the day you pick to close. Clearly, you have no control over it. If you say 30 or 45 or whatever, you have no control over it, and everything's going to go crazy on you. So I would look at the calendar, and I would just make an educated decision as to what I want that day to be. Does that help? I hope it does. how do I get you back here? Okay, I don't know how to get you back. All right. All right, if you have a question, let me know. Okay, all right, let's take a look at number E. I like E. This usually gets missed. E is kind of a cute one. We slid that in there a couple of years ago now. Buyer and seller are referred to herein as the who? The parties. Guess what? That's consistent with the rest of the country, okay? The parties, buyer and seller. Brokers are not parties to this agreement. So please don't do things that makes you a party, okay? Do not collect the check. Do not, whatever, all right? Don't do things that makes you a party, and don't, we're going to sue you. Oh, really? Maybe your broker would like to know that you're including them in the lawsuit. And it's like, no, let's not say that, okay? You are just the facilitator. In some states, that's what we call you. You're just the facilitator, all right? The parties are the buyer and the seller. And so that's why we saved a ton of ink, right? When we started calling them buyer and the seller, because, we started calling them parties because we avoided 3 words. Now we're only doing 2. So anyway, I thought it was pretty comical because the old forms were a little difficult to read because everything was the buyer and the seller, the buyer and the seller. And then we'd argue about whether there should be buyer and the seller or seller and the buyer. There was a time not that long ago where we actually looked at the initials at the bottom of the pages, and we said, how can we have the buyer on one side, the seller on the other side, and then in another document it's the other way around? And then we actually literally went in, and I think it was intelligent to do it, made them all the same. Okay, so across the board, you've always got the buyer on the left, seller on the right, whatever we're doing. Okay, all right. So just remember, you do not want to be a party to this agreement. Clearly, if the two of them start getting into it with each other, you're going to want to back out. All right, you want to say, I got nothing to do with this. I'm in here, but I'm just here to make this work, not to help you resolve your dispute. Okay, all right, everybody good with that? That's paragraph number 2. Let me change my screen a little bit so that I can see you. Is there a question in there? Raising that up just a little bit. There we go. Okay, all right, let's take a look. Now you're completely gone. Gosh darn it. Linda. Okay, so, okay, good. No more questions. All right, so let's take a look at paragraph number 2. Paragraph number 2. Oh, gee, that's not important. You lose your license here. Okay, so let's pay attention. All right, paragraph number 2. Agency, the law of agency. And as we said this morning, somebody asked me, I made a comment about that agency disclosure form. Why don't you take a look at page 2 on the agency disclosure form? In the old days, we would throw it out because there wasn't anything for anybody to do on it. We would just throw it out. It's like, well, read it. It's amazing. If you don't understand agency, and I've never met a broker, and Robert Muir, I got to give him credit, a really good attorney on our risk management committee. He made a comment in a class I was teaching the legal aspects of real estate, and I had him in as a guest speaker, and he had the top 10 lawsuits against real estate brokers. And he said in his thing, he said, I've never met a broker that explained agency to me. And, it's interesting, we think we're running a business, but we sometimes don't understand the key concept. Agency is incredibly important, so much so that DRE says if you don't disclose agency to the client, you're not entitled to get paid. And by the way, you close a transaction, they can take your license for that. So you want to make sure that you do that. So when I said to you earlier about the template, page 1 of the template is always going to be our disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships form. And kudos to the California Association of Realtors for finally adding that in there and making that part of all of our forms so that you can't miss it. You got to go out of your way to get rid of it. You got to have the agency disclosure. So that's going to take us to where we're going right now. We're going to talk about agency. And let me clear the drawings. So number A, and we've only got 3 paragraphs in this, and I don't know why all of this is in one. It's supposed to be in 2 pages, but I'm not going to care because I'm going to just handle it all right here. Hang on a second. Maybe I do care. Let me see if I can make this go to page. Oh yeah, so I broke it down for you. Okay, so we covered all that already. Let's go to there we go. Let's just single out agency. Now that I've figured out my brain, now we know what we're doing. Let's go back to my annotation, and he says with confidence. Okay, good. All right, so we're good. Okay, so now we're looking at agency. Paragraph number 2A says very simply, disclosure. The parties each acknowledge a receipt of the what? Disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships form. Okay, that's what we've been talking about. Okay. So, I had this conversation with Neil Kalin, the attorney, one of the attorneys at CAR. And I said, is that a checkbox? It's already checked. Can I uncheck it? And he goes, no, we know you have to do it. So we're going to leave that as a checkbox. It's checked. The assumption is going to be the assumption is that your client has read and signed that form, that they have acknowledged receipt of that form. Please don't get to this point unless you have done that, because you are very clearly conducting actions that require the disclosure of agency, okay? And so when I say you lose your license for this, it's a big deal. All right, so let's please make sure we do that. Paragraph number B is all about confirmation. So the law says, Civil Code 2079 says that you must disclose the concept of agency, but then you must also confirm agency. And so, and Veronica Kilpatrick, and listen, I listen to Veronica, okay? She's got it dialed in. Deputy Commissioner, got it dialed in. And she comes to our meetings, our risk management meetings. And I'm going to tell you, she says, this is this one part that always gets missed. People just do this wrong. This used to be paragraph number 23 at the back of the contract. And so nobody ever filled it out. So, guess what? They're having a ball going after brokers and nobody ever knew they were doing it. Okay. All right. So, so this is where, so we must disclose at the time that we do our buyer representation agreement and the time that we do our listing agreement, we must disclose the concept of agency. And that's what your AD form does. It discloses the concept. Then later on, it also says, here's what happens where the agent represents the buyer. Here's what happens when the agent represents the seller. Here's what happens when they represent both. Dual agency, remember, if you don't have dual agency, the concept of dual agency disclosed, again, license loser. So that's such an easy thing to avoid. In other states where I'm teaching, they actually have, you must confirm that the buyer is still willing to accept a dual agency. So, here I'm writing an offer. I'm the broker with our firm, and I'm writing an offer to someone else who's also, the listing agent is also in our firm. I didn't know that when I did the buyer, I did the buyer representation agreement, but I sure know it at the time of the offer. So I need to confirm it here. And folks, trust me, not after this, here. Right now, okay? So, and now I know, right? Because I'm writing my offer, so I know what brokerage I'm with. So now I'm single agency, and now I'm writing an offer on a listing that's held by our broker, the big broker in the company. And guess what? Now I know I'm going to have dual agency. But before that, all I knew was single agency. When I took the listing, all I knew was single agency. Now, as I'm got my offer going, now I know, boom, here we go. We're going to be a dual agency. We need to make that disclosure. And in all 50 states, bad things happen to you if you don't do that. And like I said, in some states, the buyer can refuse to allow dual agency. They can say, no, I'm not going to allow it. And then we have designated agents, and then we have all this other confusing stuff. California, actually, believe it or not, keeps it pretty simple. So confirmation, the following real estate agency relationships are confirmed. So we changed this on you about 2 years ago. It used to say the listing brokerage. Now it says the seller's brokerage. We made it in English, right? Seller, buyer, rather than listing agent, selling agent. That was confusing to so many people. Firm name goes in here. Their firm name license number goes in there. Your MLS Connect should pull that in for you. Okay. And then are you representing only the seller? You would check that box, or you would check that box, okay, as a dual agent, okay? And then your name would go in here. Now, those are auto-populating from your cover sheet from within zip form. So unless you're doing this manually, it should happen for you. The check boxes don't. And that's the part I want you to watch for, because when you write your offer, the program doesn't know that you're in the same brokerage. We haven't gotten it thinking that way yet. So make sure you find out which box, because if you don't check a box, then you have not confirmed agency. And again, everybody's going to go for that. Okay. So again, the other issue to watch out for is make sure they spell the brokerage's name right. So, when you pull it in, I frequently write offers and our name is spelled correctly. Although in our name, when it's written out, sometimes, it's truncated, it's put together. I need to put spaces in because our name is actually longer than one of the other big brokerages in town. And so I actually have to make it so that it complies with the DRE requirement. So make sure that it's spelled right. If you're the listing agent, you receive an offer from someone and they've spelled your your brokerage name incorrectly, you need to fix that in an AC form, with a confirmation of real estate agency relationships form. You got to fix it. Don't blow it off, or it's blank. That's even worse. Buyers write an offer on 20 properties, and then the agent doesn't take the time to put in the brokerage name, and guess what? It's blank. Blank is not a confirmation. So be very, very careful. You're the listing agent. Be good about it. Make sure you're reading your contract before you go to the next level. Okay. All right. And then all that, the rest of that's all the same. Everybody's DRE numbers have to be in there. You knew this was coming. We've been talking about that for 10 years. It's about time that we did that. Okay. Everybody good with that? Clear my drawings. What else am I going to tell you about in here? I like the fact what we did, we call it the brokerage firm. It is not about you. It is about the brokerage. Okay. So technically, and people ask me, they say, well, we're dual agents, right? Okay. I'm with this big company and I'm the buyer's agent. They're the seller's agent. So we are both buyer and seller, right? We're representing both the buyer and the seller. And so, do I have to fill in this second part down here? And the answer is no. You're the dual agent, right? So let me correct my little thingy here. Okay, good. So you're a dual agent. You've already done that. You already said it's a dual agent. You don't need it again. And if some of you will remember, there was a third thing on the old form last edition that just confused everybody. The agent of the seller only, and it made no sense at all. So unfortunately, they took that out of there. Okay. Any questions about that? We are killing this paragraph. Okay, let me see. Seeing no questions. Okay, all right. I always wonder, when I'm teaching these classes, whether or not everybody's asleep, whether they've gone off and gotten lunch, what's going on. But I so appreciate your time. I really do. I want to make it valuable for you. So let's go ahead, and we're going to actually, I think we're going to wrap this up with this last part here. So now we're going to talk about potentially competing buyers and sellers. And so some of you will remember that this wasn't a big deal until about 10 years ago. Awake. Thanks, James. James, I think I sent you some stuff today. I think I've sent you a couple things today. So anyway, double check. I think your .biz address. Okay, so potentially competing buyers and sellers. So here's how this works, and it sounds confusing, but it really isn't. So when you are writing an offer, let's say you're with a big brokerage firm, and you are writing an offer on a property, you need and this comes from a really big court case, which was really ugly and cost a lot of money. But you need to make sure you get permission from your buyer for your brokerage to represent other competing buyers, perhaps for that same property. And so think about it for a second. You're writing your offer, listing agent says, I got 16 offers. And you're sitting there going, oh, great. How many of those are within my company? Because guess what? Now you're writing a competing offer for a buyer, that may be in competition with another buyer, but they're both under the same broker. And the legal fiction, of course, says that since they're under the same broker, now that both of them have knowledge of the other, when in fact they don't. And so we need to have their permission to represent competing offers to theirs. Okay. All right. And so, and the same holds true for the other side. So this is the form actually that appears right after the agency disclosure form and right before the WFA, the wire fraud advisory form. So that's my PRBS, and that is the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller disclosure, but then also consent. So by getting your buyer to sign that form, your buyer has consented to maybe your broker representing more than one offer on this property that your buyer is going after, and that those are competing offers. Okay, everybody good with that? Let me explain to you from the seller's side, because this is what the court case was about. Okay, so broker lists a property, and the listed seller wants $900,000. Okay, everybody see that all right? God, I hope you can see this. I usually check to make sure you can see my screen. Are you all able to see the one I'm writing on? Okay, that's not it. Hang on a second. Let me pull up. Oh Lord, can you see the one I'm writing on? That's not it. Try it again. Okay, there. Okay. I just had to do this to myself in the middle of my presentation. All right, so back here, let me know if you can see just paragraph number 2. And I'm going to circle again, C down at the bottom. And the reason I'm saying this is because it's pretty important that this concept that I'm going to tell you here in a second. Can everybody see that page? Can you see this writing? So I'm going to put 900K. Can everybody see 900K? Any one person tell me? Thank you, James. Uh, Thank you, Maria. Oh, thank you, Jason. God, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Suzanne. Wow, thank you all. I really appreciate that. Okay, so this is an important concept. This is where this whole thing came about. This is where this whole problem was. So here we've got this house listed for 900K. Okay, broker lists the house. Along comes, it's on the market, probably priced too high. It's on a street. Okay, another broker comes in and lists a house across the street, a broker with the same brokerage firm. So, and we know what that means. You're part of a big company, and this was the Del Mar office, and then another agent from the same brokerage firm comes along from the Chula Vista office and lists the house across the street. Seller puts that one on the market for $720,000. Okay, so guess what? Seller number 1, same brokerage, okay, different agents, completely different agents. So seller number 1 sues the brokerage. Why? Because the brokerage just created a loss in value of their property of $180,000. At least in their brain, that's what happened. Maybe the seller was overpriced to begin with. Maybe this seller really just wanted to sell their house. Okay, but the first seller came along and said, you listed my competition, you undercut the value I could have gotten for my property by doing that. And folks, they won. Okay, so remember what I've said to you this before. What is fair? Fair is a place you show pigs. Okay, it is not fair. This business is not fair. All right, seller number 1 sues and wins because the brokerage had another agent within the same company went out and listed the property across the street for less money. They wanted to sell their house, but seller number 1 prevailed because they didn't have the brokerage didn't have the permission of the seller to list competing properties for whatever price that they were. Okay, and so then we came along with this court decision that said, you really kind of should have gotten permission to do that. And that's where this all went. That's ugly. Okay, I'm sorry. So now we have the seller also sign that same PRBS form that says, you know what, we need your permission to list competing properties in the area. Now, one of the things that court case did not do is it did not tell us how far out, a block, a mile, 20 miles. It didn't give us anything. It just said you can't compete, so the CAR attorneys put together this form, and I think, frankly, brilliantly so, put together this form that says you're going to give us consent because you're not, otherwise it's going to be restraint of trade, a few other issues that we're not going to get into today, but that's where this all came from. This came from an actual listing on a property, and it did not go well for the brokerage firm. Okay. And I'm sad about that. I mean, good brokerage firm, a really good brokerage firm, but it just was the way that it was. Okay. All right. So that's the point behind it. So now, just like we have that conversation up here, I'm going to have that conversation down here too. There's that checkbox. You can't uncheck it. It's a checkbox. It is there. And that checkbox says that everybody acknowledges receipt of that PRBS form. And that PRBS form is essentially consent to represent competing buyers or competing sellers. All of this under my paragraph for agency. And I'm going to tell you is as much as, paragraph number 1, the purchase price is the most important paragraph for the buyer and seller. Paragraph number 2 is the most important paragraph for you. And that is important. So please be very thorough. This is a good time to be OCD. It's a good time to check your work. When you write your offer, make sure that it's written properly. Make sure that you have this right spelling. I get people that write offers on our company is Burke Real Estate Consultants, Inc. It is a corporation. It is a DBA at the Department of Real Estate. We are licensed. We have a a brokerage number, okay? And then people will write their offer. Instead of putting Burke Real Estate Consultants Inc., they'll shorthand it and they'll go Burke Realty. That doesn't work, right? We're not Burke Realty, and you're writing an offer on one of our listings. We're going to have to insist that it be called Burke Real Estate Consultants Inc. And since we're not going to have you go back and rewrite it, which by the way, we do that in other states, right? You send it back to the broker, said you're going to have to fix that. We're not going to look at it. In some states that's what they do. So, but in California, I'm going to have to fix that myself. If I'm the listing agent, now I'm going to have to do my AC form. Okay, and my AC form is my confirmation of real estate agency relationships. And that is now and it says right on there, this is or this is not a substitute for what was in here. If this is wrong, I must fix it. Do not let that go. And I can tell you when the pencil pushers are just looking for something, they're just dying to catch us at a mistake. Then, I was involved in I do DRE audits. I help brokers with DRE audits. And I was involved in one once where the only thing that they could find, because I was coaching the brokerage, but the only thing they could find wrong was down at the bottom of the form. It had the agent's name on there. It was, and the agent had, and the agent had been with a different broker at the time of the offer. It was somehow it ended up in this broker's file. And it's like, they needed to go home with something, so it's like, okay, fine. But that was so minuscule, not even anything to be reported. So just remember, this is a big ticket item. If this is not done right, or the checkbox is not done, and remember, you can't change it over the signature because the buyer's already signed it. So now you need to fix it. And the way to fix it is the confirmation of real estate agency relationships, the CAR form AC. Everybody good with that? Okay. All right. So that went a lot faster than I thought it would. And I hope that you will please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you. Okay. Thank you all. Be good for now.
Need more help? Contact SDAR Member Services at 858-715-8040 or membership@sdar.com.